It is 11 a.m. on a Thursday morning in Tuscaloosa, Alabama. Time once again for Southern Fried Sports right here on your home for University of Alabama Athletics. Tide 100.9 FM. Travis Reier, senior analyst for BamaOnline.com, with you each and every weekday morning from 11 a.m. until noon. The show, as always, brought to you by Peterbrook Chocolatier out there at 1530 McFarland Boulevard North in the Indian Hills section of Tuscaloosa. And if we have ever needed more chocolate in our life, I think it's safe to say we have reached that point. Peterbrook Chocolatier, get by there and check them out in the Indian Hills section of Tuscaloosa. Joined as always on the program by producer Josh Smith, who together we combine to form the 60-minute man of Sports Talk Radio. And Josh, wow. I'm not exactly sure where to start because so much of what we're experiencing right now, as was the case, kind of started on our show yesterday in terms of real-time updating this situation involving the coronavirus and the widespread impact on our society in general, not just from a sports perspective. But I guess that's what we're going to ultimately do or try to provide the service of here during the hour we're with you today, is try to just kind of lay the groundwork, put it out there, let you know what we know as we know it. And Josh, you're going to have to help us out with that this morning.
Hey, we're going to do the best we can. We may not have the boots on the ground, but we're going to be definitely surveying as far as any of the news headlines and different updates breaking.
No doubt about it. What you're hearing here just in the last 5 minutes or so is that most of the Power 5 conferences, if not all of them at this point, have decided to cancel their events. You saw first round play in some of those tournaments here in the last day or so. The Big Ten last night, the SEC last night, and we were supposed to be just an hour away, essentially, from the tip-off for an 8-9 game in the SEC tournament between the Alabama Crimson Tide and the Tennessee Vols. That is not going to happen, as is the rest of that SEC tournament. Now we know is not going to happen. So that's where we're headed. That's where we're headed. And I can tell you this, I was up after midnight last night watching our Rainbow Wahine in the Big West women's quarterfinals out in Long Beach, California. Play it loud today. That is the one positive we can give you today. The Rainbow Wahine with a win over Cal State Fullerton late last night, overnight, out on the West Coast. So I've been texting with Savannah, our daughter there, member of the Hawaii women's basketball team, here in the last few moments. And as all of these cancellations are unfolding, I don't know if they've said for sure in, say, the Big West Conference if they're going to cancel the rest of the tournament, but I would think that it's on Mark Emmert at this point, the major domo of the governing body of collegiate athletics, to step forward here and essentially let us know that in all likelihood, at least a postponement of the NCAA tournament for 2020 is on the table here, if not an outright cancellation. I mean, this is where we're at now. And you can talk about, well, fear-mongering or things like that, but if you listen to some experts at the same time that are talking about this topic, talking about this disease, there is very much reason for legitimate concern. There is. When you look at what has happened in other parts of the world in connection to this coronavirus. I think initially when things start to break like they did yesterday, human instinct is, whoa, now let's not go overboard here with this thing. And I'm very much in that camp. I'm not overreact guy in situations like this. But when you see how in Italy, in other places, how this disease is multiplying in terms of the transmission rate, I think you have to take every precaution. And when you start pulling NBA teams off the court, I don't know how you can justify putting quote, amateur, end quote, athletes on the floor, keeping them on the floor, like we saw in Oklahoma City last night with the Thunder and the Jazz canceling that game. Rudy Gobert, the Jazz player, testing positive for the coronavirus. And now we hear Donovan Mitchell, one of his teammates, has tested positive. And again, we're talking about a transmission rate that is, when you listen to experts talk about it, we're talking about it increases, it doubles every 4 days, or at least that's been the case in, say, Italy. The transmission rate has doubled every 4 days, and it's showing signs of that type of duplication in already areas of the United States, like the Pacific Northwest in Seattle. And experts are saying this is going to be 10 times worse than your typical flu season. So please, folks, take every precaution you possibly can. The primary transmission of this thing is respiratory. So just breathing is sending this stuff to others. And a couple words you need to prepare yourself for if you haven't already: social distancing. And oh, by the way, no vaccine in sight. And then you've got potential concerns in terms of shortages in medical personnel, medical equipment. Again, I'm not trying to send anybody into a panic, but be diligent, be aware, take every precaution you possibly can. And at this point, all we can kind of do on the individual level is limit our contact. That's about all we can do. Stay out of areas where large groups gather. Keep your hands clean. That's about it, man. It's crazy. Surreal is about the only way I can sort of sum it up. So we'll get into how this is continuously real time, by the moment, impacting the sports world, which is very much secondary to society in general, and making sure we take care of ourselves. But there are sports that are still going on out there. The PGA Tour with the Players Championship down there in Ponte Vedra, Florida, just had an announcement that fans will be not allowed in that event over the weekend, but the plan is for play to continue. So if you're not a golf fan, you might be by the end of this weekend, because if you're a sports fan, that might be the extent of what you have to consume is the Players Championship. That's it. That's probably going to be it, because there's going to be no SEC men's tournament moving forward. There's no Big Ten men's tournament moving forward. One by one, they're dropping. And right here at home, what you've heard here in the last 24 hours from Greg Byrne and the University of Alabama is that essential personnel, it's another couple of words you need to keep in mind. If there are sporting events that are conducted, say, on the university level, different places around collegiate athletics, that's what you're going to be dealing with at Alabama through March the 30th. So, when you talk about Alabama baseball this weekend, that would be in play. You talk about Alabama softball at Rhodes Stadium this weekend. You got Texas coming in here as a part of Alabama's latest invitational event. That would be in play. That's just kind of where we're at. That's where we're at, folks. 205-342-9904. That is the Peterbrook Chocolatier studio line. If you'd like to check in with us, again, we're kind of just keeping our attention on some of the real-time news that is coming across here. What do you got, Josh?
I don't know if you saw this, but the events, the PGA Tour, as you were talking about earlier, will continue without fans being there now, that being announced.
Yeah, we just talked about that.
Sorry about that.
And just covered that if you are a sports fan, that's going to have your attention. So again, we continue to monitor the situation. and how far impacting it really, really is. And that there is no, I don't think, simple answer to this thing. So, that's kind of where we're at. We're going to head to our first break. When we come back, more Southern Fried Sports here on a Thursday. At the bottom of the hour, we will check in with my colleague there at BamaOnline.com, Charlie Potter. Spring practice at the University of Alabama, at last check anyway, set to get underway on Friday afternoon. So we'll certainly continue to preview that, look ahead to that while we can. And we'll do more of that with Charlie at the bottom of the hour. Until then, open phone lines at 205-342-9904. More of Southern Fried Sports on a Thursday right after this. More tournament cancellations coming across your social media timelines. The ACC tournament now officially canceled. Meanwhile, up at the Big East tournament, they balling. Typical Big East, right? Corona ain't played nobody. Big East still ongoing as we speak. We'll see how long that lasts. Also, when you talk about how far-reaching this is, right here on the local level, you've got a couple of teams set to participate in national tournaments. When you talk about Shelton State, the men's and women's teams out there of Madonna Thompson and Joe Eatman, respectively. Just two great, great programs. Shelton State women are set to travel to Lubbock, Texas on Sunday for the Division I national tournament out there in West Texas. And then you've got the men's team that is set to make its way to Hutchinson, Kansas. And the NJCAA just offered an update in which it sounds like it's still all systems go for those events. JC don't play around, man. Hardcore at the junior college level. But it does sound like some teams from various parts of the country aren't going to be able to make the trip. And what the NJCAA is doing is replacing teams that aren't going to be able to make it with other teams. So Wallace State up in Hanceville, for example, the women's team is actually now going to make its way to the National Junior College women's tournament as a replacement team, which kind of brings into play if you do have a big dance in college basketball, and you have teams that have secured bids for these NCAA tournaments, whether it's men's, women's. If you have a team with an infected player or players that have to go into quarantine, and you're going to lose your field becomes incomplete. So I don't know how you sustain that and continue on. I mean, the NJCAA is doing replacement teams for its national tournaments. It's hard to envision that scenario playing out in NCAA tournament play. Let's go to the phone lines right now where we have Ellis up first and Donald on deck. Ellis, how you doing?
Just fine. I just want to say I think it's blown way out of proportion.
You think so, huh?
Yes, way out of proportion.
Okay.
To the point where you ain't going to have a game period and you don't want nobody on the campus. That's just going too far. It's just everybody's listening to the media. That's what the media wants you to do, is to listen to them, and all of them are a bunch of liars.
All of us are liars, Ellis?
Not all of them, but you know which ones I'm talking about.
Okay.
The ones that's talking about.
All right, I just had to check. I mean,
I just think it's just a big.
Here. I mean, I think what you got.
Everybody's making too big of a deal out of it, in my opinion.
That may be true.
That's my opinion.
That may be true to an extent. To an extent, I think that may be true. I also think there is a service, a duty that has to be carried out so that the general public is aware of the situation. I think we both agree on that, right? There has to be a level of awareness, and so, but there's also a point where, you have to protect the well-being of as many people as you possibly can. In terms of free will and what people want to do from there, that's up to those individuals.
I'm not going to start worrying until hundreds of people just start falling over dead.
Mm-hmm.
When people start just falling over dead, that's one time to be worried. But
Is
right
it too
now,
late at that
I'm not
point,
worried
though, to
about
worry if people are falling over dead, Ellis?
Yeah, that's when I'll start worrying about it.
All right.
It's an epidemic then, but it's just
well, I mean,
hearsay.
it is the society we live in today. There is certainly a liability aspect to a lot of this, and a lot of it goes back to bottom line dollars and cents. I think a big reason why these conference tournaments have waited as long as they have is because there's a lot of chicken in the pot from that perspective, trying to get these things to come off because of the financial boom that they represent to universities.
Yeah, that's another thing. Can you imagine the money that's being lost?
Yeah. No, and here's the thing.
Millions of dollars is being lost.
Yeah, I mean, you hate it. You hate it for the schools. I hate it more for the folks down the trough, so to speak, that work in these arenas, that depend on these events to just make it week to week. You understand what I'm saying? Support staff type people, salt of the earth people that depend on that hourly wage, that weekly compensation just to make ends meet.
And now they're not getting it because of this. It's just too big.
It's far reaching, and it's very, very sad. It is, no doubt about
it. But if they don't get it straightened out, I tell you something else that'll be postponed. Bonnaroo.
What's that? Oh, I mean, Bonnaroo, that's coming. I mean, you've already seen what Coachella and Stagecoach postponed. So music festivals, no doubt. I mean, you're talking about massive gatherings of 50,000 plus people. I mean, that's the target logistic that they're most worried about right now with this situation. So, yeah, I hate it for you, Ellis, up there in Manchester, right there in your backyard. But yeah, it's hard to envision right now that this thing's going to be turned around quickly enough to.
Do you think any of these people that and I call them millennials, the younger generation, if they had to live like I lived back in the day, where you had to live off the land and stuff.
Yeah.
Back in the old days, they'd go ballistic. They couldn't handle it. Travis.
Well, you see them at Bonnaroo. That's primitive camping, and they think that's a lot. Not all of them, but some of the younger crowd. Hey, look, I'm 51 years old, and I probably couldn't make it a week, Davy Crockett style. Okay, so I can't I can't go okay boomer on the millennials too bad. If I was counting on berries and rabbits and squirrels to get by, I don't know if I'd make it 2 weeks, Ellis, if I'm being honest with you. I'm no Davy Crockett. I'm not Travie Crockett, put it that way. All right.
Travis Crockett, there you go.
Now if I were with you, I'd be okay, because you'd make sure we have fire and food and water and all those things. But left to my own devices in the wild, yeah, it probably wouldn't.
Did you see my new profile picture on Facebook?
Yeah, you're looking good. Yeah.
Got the big Corona sign up there.
Yeah, I hear you. Well, hey, look, seriously, take care of yourself. That's all we can do at this point is make sure on the personal level we're taking the steps we need to take. That's what we need to do, Ellis.
Yes, sir. But I just had to throw my 2 cents worth in.
I got you. We appreciate the call as always. There he goes, Ellis. Ellis not having it, He's not having it with the Corona. Let's head back to the Peterbrook Chocolatier studio line at 205-342-9904 and check in with Donald on this Thursday morning. Donald, how you doing?
Hey, Travis, good morning to you again.
Good morning.
Can I buy a steak in your show about $1 worth in Confederate dollars, please? I'm just kidding.
Oh, man. Tell you.
But unbelievable what's happening here. The cancellations and all that stuff. especially an hour before you're supposed to throw it up in the air. I can only imagine what those players of both of those teams went through up there in Nashville today with Alabama, Tennessee.
Well, and I'll tell you this too, as a parent of a student athlete that's actually in one of these tournaments out at the Big West. It's just it's absolutely surreal. And my kid, this is it for her. This is her senior year, and she played in a game last night, and had no real inclination that win or lose, she knew if they lost, that was her last game. But even with a win, that was probably her last game, as a truly competitive basketball player on the college level. And so it's amazing. And now we're seeing the Pac-12 tournament. I mean, this is all a formality at this point. Josh is telling me now that SEC baseball through March the 30th has been canceled. I mean, we're just getting started, Donald. That's what people need to understand here. Except for the PGA Tour, I guess, because the PGA Tour says we're playing. And now maybe there's something to that. You're playing on golf courses. You're talking about acres, a lot of room on golf courses. You're outside. But anything contained to even somewhat smallish areas, certainly indoors, they're gone, man. They're done.
What about softball, Dan? Ask anything about softball?
I got to think that's coming.
I haven't seen anything just yet, but will keep you posted.
If baseball's shutting it down.
Yeah, but they got to do something quickly because Alabama's playing tonight at 6 o'clock, and I think they got a game before that at 4.
Well, yeah, I mean, you got teams coming in from all over.
Yeah, I mean, they're already here.
Texas coming in. Texas is here, I'm sure.
What about Bryant? And,
up from the Northeast.
I mean, but the thing is, I knew once they canceled the basketball, I knew everything else was going to be canceled. Gymnastics will be canceled. Equestrian will be canceled. I mean, the thing is, though, just suspend it, just do it, and I think now because they're doing all this, they might as well just go ahead and cancel March Madness and everything that goes with it because
it's just hard to envision any other scenario playing out other than that at this point. And now Ross Dellinger of Sports Illustrated is reporting that all SEC athletic events are canceled through the month of March.
Okay.
Yeah, multiple reports of that now showing up.
Yeah.
So it's shut down, man. We're shut down.
Well, the thing about it is, how are they going to figure all this out when they come back and in April? If they
and how does when you say athletic events, are we just talking about contests? What about spring practice? That is practice still allowed? But I would be surprised if that's the case because you're bringing large groups of people together. Although football teams essentially spend every day together anyway.
Yeah, Alabama starts practice tomorrow. So
I mean, exactly.
Coach Saban, I mean, is that an individual decision made by the schools? I would imagine so, because it's not in season. Or is that made by the conference?
Yeah, I mean, it's not an athletic contest, which is what we're seeing, being canceled. It's a practice, but it's still SEC affiliated. So, I mean, there's still things we got to clear up, but it's just incredible.
Well, I feel sorry for Nashville. I feel sorry for Nashville with the basketball because
they've had enough. They've had enough here in the last month, haven't they?
Yeah,
Nashville.
And they've lost all this revenue from the tournament. So I would hope that the SEC would figure out a way to compensate Nashville for what they're losing up there in some way. And because you can't tell me the SEC can't afford it. And
well, they have, I believe, kind of funds in place to help for situations like this. I'm guessing events like this are insured as well. But how exactly that all works out, who knows? I'm not worried as much about the Power 5 leagues at the top, again, as I am people who are dependent upon these events to make a living.
Well,
you know what I'm saying?
I'm going to tell you this, and I'll say it, and I won't go into too much of this, but I can tell you that there's a possibility I will be directly affected by this in a personal way.
Yeah.
because of all this. And
Exactly. And somehow, some way, all of us in society are going to be impacted, whether directly or someone close to us. None of us are going to totally escape the impact of this situation.
I just think that,
Whether it's our health, whether it's economically, in our community, it appears inescapable at this point. We just have to try to do everything we can again on an individual basis to sort of limit the negative impact of this thing.
well, that's just that some of us can't afford, we can't limit the impact when you've got, you got your bills you got to pay, and those bills are going to come regardless of all this. So regardless, but the thing about it is, I just hope that the political posturing that we've been seeing will stop for the good of common sense, to deal with all this together as one community, one state, one country, and we can overcome all this. But I got a feeling the posturing is not going to stop. And
No, and that's the shame of it all. Politics and agendas and things like that oftentimes prove to be a bigger obstacle for us than anything else, and that's a shame. But I agree. I hope that's not the case. But I have my concerns, just like you do, Donald. We got to head to a break, but we appreciate the call as always.
Travis, have a good one, and y'all just hang in there, okay?
You too, bud. Take care of yourself. There he goes, Donald. We're going to head to a break. When we come back, Charlie Potter of BamaOnline.com will join us. We'll ask Charlie some of these questions. We'll probably try to sort through it in conjunction with one another when Southern Fried Sports returns on Tide 100.9 FM right after this. Back with more of a Thursday edition of Southern Fried Sports right here on Tide 100.9 FM. Travis Schreier, senior analyst for BamaOnline.com, with you each and every weekday morning from 11 a.m. until noon. Let's head to the Peterbrook Chocolatier studio line right now and check in with my cohort there at BamaOnline.com, team reporter Charlie Potter. And wow, Charlie, all we can do at this point, it seems, is hit the refresh on the old laptop there on the social media outlets, because this thing with the coronavirus, and really starting yesterday, just moment to moment, real time. I was asked by Josh in the break, I'm 51 years old, had I ever seen anything like this? And of course my answer is no. I mean, this is all unprecedented, not just so much in terms of the global story that this situation is, but when you combine the social media era with this, crazy. Only way I know how to describe it. I don't know about you.
Yeah, it's been really weird to follow, because it has been basically like a minute-to-minute updates, especially today. I mean, you look at how crazy last night was with all the news about the tournaments. You had the Rudy Gobert news. You had Tom Hanks, which, if this coronavirus hurts Tom Hanks, we're going to have to throw hands. But it just seemed like about every 15 minutes or every 30 minutes there was a new update, and it hasn't changed this morning. You have the news of the SEC canceling its tournament. The rest of the Power 5 conferences doing that as well. As of right now, the SEC has canceled all regular season sporting events until later this month on March 30th. So, I was kind of surprised that this phone call wasn't canceled, to be honest. It seems like everything's starting to shut down here in the last 18 or so hours.
Well, typically after we have you on, I'll go ahead and let you know, Charlie, we do Lysol everything after you appear on the show, regardless of the coronavirus. But no, in all seriousness, I guess what we're waiting on now is the status of spring football practice in the Southeastern Conference, and specifically right here in Tuscaloosa.
Yeah, that's the big one. I mean, I know everybody, likes postseason basketball. March Madness is popular because of that. And, the baseball team was starting up SEC play, but I think everybody knows that with Alabama, football is king. And, as of right now, everything is still on as scheduled. I think the good news for Alabama is it only has one day before spring break. Then you kind of get a 10-day break before returning on March 23rd. And the stipulation with the release that the SEC just put out is that it's regular season competition. This is practices. It's obviously not open to the public. We're in there for a brief period, and that'll probably, if they're going to axe something, I think they'll still probably go on with practice. But they'll probably axe our availability, which isn't really that much of a surprise. But just kind of looking around the rest of the league, I think our friends over at the LSU 24/7 site, Shea Dixon and Company, they put out that LSU still plans to have its annual coaches clinic, and they're going to continue on-campus recruiting. I think if Nick Saban has any kind of say in it, if he sees other teams around the SEC continuing to host recruits and to have things like their coaches clinic and spring practice, then Alabama will do the same. But it's going to be something we continue to monitor. That's something that I've reached out and asked about at Alabama. Everything's on schedule right now, but as we've seen with the last 18, 20 hours or so, things can change quickly, so we'll continue to keep tabs on that.
So if this is it for Alabama men's basketball this season, and we're having to make some assumptions if we go there that, well, we don't have to make an assumption at this point about the SEC tournament or today's scheduled, now canceled matchup with Tennessee in the second round of the SEC tournament. How do we sum up this basketball season for the Alabama Crimson Tide in year one under Nate Oates?
Yeah, I mean, you look at it and you got to think that the NCAA tournament might be next in terms of being on the chopping block. And if it's not, you think the NIT probably will be, just because it doesn't generate the kind of revenue that a March Madness does. But for Alabama, it looks like the season will probably end abruptly. And I think it'll end in disappointing fashion, because I think Nate Oates and company were looking forward to getting to Nashville and to bouncing back and in some degree, at least playing a little bit more effort. That's been his MO the last two games, losses to Vanderbilt and to Missouri down the stretch, as the effort hasn't been there. And that's going to be something that's obviously addressed in the off season when they start to meet with players and you see the roster kind of take shape for the next season, and how Alabama will attack that in terms of adding players and losing players. So I think it ended in disappointing fashion. I think everybody, though, could see at times during the season that this thing was starting to change course from what it has been the last several years, that Nate Oates brings an exciting brand of basketball when everybody's buying in and playing with max effort. And I think he's going to try to get players in there that can do that on a more consistent basis. And you're going to have the guys that were injured and held out by the NCAA back. You're probably going to have some new additions to the roster before next season. But I think that it is more or less the same of what we've seen in last year, just in terms of that inconsistency. But when they were playing well, they were playing with the best teams in the league. And we'll see if they can continue that into next season and build off of that.
What's your expectation for Kyra Lewis Jr. In terms of the potential for him returning for another year at Alabama?
Yeah, I mean, I think he's a guy that, at the very least, entertains the draft. The good thing with men's basketball is guys can go out and go to combines and things like that and choose to return to school. I think that's a good thing that basketball does, that football doesn't. But I really think that with him, he of all players has played well down the stretch. He's been playing his best basketball of late. He's a guy that was named a first-team All-SEC by the league coaches and the Associated Press, and that's warranted just because of the way he played down the stretch. So he's a guy that if anybody's going to go out for the draft and stay in the draft, I think Kyra is that player. I think we'll also have to keep tabs on a guy like John Petty, but building off the freshman year he was able to put together, I think people saw that he has a future as a pro, and he was the guy that played nearly 40 minutes every game for Alabama and was their leading scorer and best performer on a consistent basis. So for me, I think that he will entertain that. We'll see. And the good news for Alabama is that if you have a guy that goes out for the draft and gets taken and sticks on a roster, that's only good for recruiting. And I know Nate Oates believes that, and they're going to do what's best for the player. And if that's for him to go pro, so be it. If they get Kyler back for another year, that's also good for Alabama. So I think it's a win-win situation in that regard. If
Kyler leaves, who is the central building block for this team in 2020 and 2021 for the season?
Yeah, I mean, you have to see what happens with attrition. Like I said, John Petty's the guy that could also enter the draft. He's been someone that's appeared in a variety of different areas on people's draft boards. But I think if you look at just the guys will be back, you look at Herbert Jones. He's a guy that when he was on the floor and healthy, Alabama was winning games. I mean, the games that you look back on, especially in SEC play, that Alabama lost, that they should have won, Herb's banged up. Even that Penn game at the beginning of the season, Alabama loses that whenever Herb goes out. So I think he's going to be a central building block. I think Jaden Shackelford, with the year he put together as a freshman, I think he'll be even better next year and be a dynamic scorer for this team. And then a guy that we didn't see on the court that was oftentimes referred to as the best player on the team at times, at least in practice, was Javon Quinterly. And everyone knows he was held out this year because of NCAA transfer rules. He wasn't granted a waiver. And, the former McDonald's All-American, I think he can do some good things and help alleviate the pressure on Alabama if it is to lose a guy like Kyra Lewis at that point guard position. So, there's a lot of guys I think can step up and be big for the team next year, but those three are the first ones to come to mind whenever you think of guys that will be back that could be really big pieces in 2020 and 2021.
So as we let you go here, Charlie, what we know as of this moment, the SEC men's basketball tournament canceled. SEC athletic events through March the 30th canceled. Is that where you're seeing us at this point? Still awaiting word on spring football practice and how it might be impacted. I guess that's where we're at.
Yeah, I mean, as of right now, and like we've said, I mean, it changes. I was just trying to read Twitter while also keeping up with this because it has been just a stream of news coming out of a faucet at breakneck speed. But Ross Dellinger of Sports Illustrated has said that, according to his sources, the spring football practice is not included as of now in the SEC suspension of events. So it sounds like each school, at least from what he's reporting, will determine their course of action when it comes to practices. And, like I said at the beginning, if it's up to Nick Saban, I think this team will hold all 15 practices. The good news is they're all closed to the public. And the real question for me, I'm not going to be shocked if Alabama practices because it's practice. But the real question for me will be what happens on A-Day. And, of course, that falls after that March 30th window, so that's something that'll probably be revisited later. But as of now, Alabama's supposed to hit the practice field tomorrow afternoon. Nick Saban's supposed to have a press conference. The Nick Saban press conference will be interesting. I'm sure they'll have some kind of barrier.
He'll be in a hazmat suit.
Yeah. We might even have a teleconference. Who knows? But right now, they're going to practice tomorrow, and we'll see if that changes.
Yeah, you were already looking at an 8A situation due to the enhancements to Bryant-Denny Stadium that was going to have a limited capacity there. So, it's easy to sort of envision a scenario moving forward where the decision's made, look, we're just going to still have the scrimmage even in the stadium and perhaps still have it on, SEC Network Plus and part of that whip around coverage. Maybe that's what they're going to do around the league on that Saturday in general. Still a little ways off, but I think, Charlie, we qualify as essential personnel. Okay. So we should still have those media viewing periods if Alabama practices tomorrow. What do you think?
I think so. And the good news is some of these releases have said credential media. So thanks for them for including us. But yeah, I mean, bump us up to essential. I think so for sure.
All right, Charlie, in all seriousness, take care of yourself, my man. Wash those hands. Do everything you can. That's all we can do, my man.
All right, man. Wash all that studio after I hang up.
Pressure wash that baby. What are you talking about? All right, Charlie. Hope to see you tomorrow at spring practice. There he goes, Charlie Potter. does an outstanding job covering the Alabama Crimson Tide for us there at BamaOnline.com. I'm going to step aside for a final break. When we come back, we'll provide you every update we've got in relation to the sports world and this ongoing pandemic that is the coronavirus when Southern Fried Sports returns on Tide 100.9 FM right after this. Back with more of a Thursday edition of Southern Fried Sports Radio on Tide 100.9 FM. Travis Reier, senior analyst for BamaOnline.com, with you each and every weekday morning from 11 a.m. until noon. And obviously the coronavirus and its far-reaching impact on society in general, with the sports world, primary to what we deal with here on this program, dominating the discussion, not only today, but yesterday as well. And certainly it's appearing as if for the foreseeable future, because events are being canceled through the month of March now, including SEC-affiliated athletic events. We've talked about the potential impact on spring football practice. As of this time, we do not have a definitive answer for you on that. Alabama set to hit the practice field here in Tuscaloosa tomorrow afternoon. Certainly, as soon as we become aware of that news at BamaOnline.com, you'll be able to find it at BOL and with the programming we have here as well. On Tide 100.9 FM, you're going to be kept up to date by the moment, because it's very much a real-time event. And that just adds to the surreal nature of this whole thing, man. You know, you have these apps now, Instagram, where within Instagram, you have Insta Story. And that's what it's really been like, because it has updated so moment to moment that it almost feels more like a Insta Story than, you know, a timeline even. It's been that quick in coming. And so we're doing our best to keep you up to speed. A-Day, we don't know anything about that at this point. Here's what I'll tell you about spring football. If spring football in the SEC is going to appear on the SEC network, I would go ahead and consider that an official event, not a practice. It is practice. It isn't a game. But if it's on the SEC network, I think you can go ahead and consider that an event. And right now, through March 30th, what we have is a cancellation of all SEC athletic events. We'll see how it goes as we head into April. Obviously, A-Day set for April the 18th. I got to think regardless. I got to think regardless that Greg Byrne and Alabama are going to make a call on A-Day in terms of whether or not the general public is allowed into Bryant-Denny Stadium. And for the simple fact that with Alabama, you're talking about a fan base that plans for A-Day just like it would in a lot of instances a regular season game. And you got people that come from all over the country. In some instances, you got fans that come from different places around the world for A-Day. And so with plans being made or having been made when it comes to lodging, travel, all those things, you want to let the fan base know, I would think, as quickly as you possibly can. But what we are hearing is that as of right now, SEC member schools, when it comes to spring practice, it's up to the individual schools to make that call. And as we talked about with Charlie Potter, if that is in fact the case, I totally expect the Alabama football team to be on the practice field tomorrow afternoon. Totally expect that to be the case, especially if there isn't, an instance of the coronavirus impacting the program at this point. By the way, Josh Smith now tells me the first COVID death in Georgia has now been reported just a few moments ago, a 67-year-old from Marietta. So here we go. Again, not into scare tactics, not trying to push a fear-mongering narrative here at all. Just trying to do our best to keep you up to speed, keep you in tune as best we can here on the program. That's going to do it for a Thursday edition of Southern Fried Sports. Thanks to Charlie Potter for joining us. Thanks to Josh Smith for producing the program. And thank you for listening. The lunch whistle today on this Thursday, Heat Pizza Bar, downtown Tuscaloosa at Government Plaza. Nightly specials coming up on Sunday. You've got all-day happy hour at Heat Pizza Bar. Be sure to get down there, check out the best pies you will ever put in your mouth at Heat Pizza Bar, downtown Tuscaloosa at Government Plaza. Until 11 a.m. on Friday, do the best you can the rest of this Thursday, everybody.